Two young children die in tragically similar, suspicious circumstances.
To have two children die on you within a 6-month period is highly concerning and needs investigating thoroughly.
3 years later, a young woman dies in an apparent suicide.
The first thing I said, I bet it's him.
But could one man be responsible for all 3 deaths?
It could have been for him, as in many cases that I've worked with. If I can't have you, then nobody can.
This murder town is Blackburn. Killers are unpredictable. They can attack anyone at any time. Their motives are often varied, and chillingly, in a number of cases, their reason to kill is completely unknown. Some can be organised and planned with meticulous efficiency, whilst others are more opportunistic. They live amongst us in our towns and cities, and one thing sets them apart from the rest of society: their terrifying capacity to kill. Welcome to Murdertown.
Do you feel it in the air? Everything is changing, a world wasted by fear. Something wicked this way comes, something wicked this way comes. It's been around since time began, a million times around the sun. Something wicked this way comes, something wicked this way comes.
This is the town of Blackburn. Located in the county of Lancashire, it sits on the edge of the Ribble Valley, around 20 miles north of the city of Manchester. It was the first town in the UK to undertake a mass fingerprinting of its residents in 1948, following the murder of 3-year-old June Ann Devaney, leading to the conviction of Peter Griffiths, who was hung for his crime.
Blackburn. The name comes from the dark waters. The government don't really support the town as a whole. The infrastructure, trains and stuff, that infrastructure's not there.
Blackburn, it used to be a nice place to live, nice people, and over years it's just gone down and down and down. There's loads of bail hostels and doss houses. It's just not a nice place at the moment.
The football club, Blackburn Rovers, is obviously a huge part of the culture of the town, and it's extremely multicultural. Blackburn does have an amazing sense of community spirit. Statistically, quite high rates of crime, domestic violence, and that is something that the council and the police there are always aware of.
Lancashire is made up of about 230-odd little small towns. Blackburn is one of them.
This is Hazel Close, a residential street not far from the centre of Blackburn. In 2019, it was home to a young 23-year-old woman called Evie Adams.
Evie, she was funny, dippy, loving, yeah, and very thoughtful, really thoughtful. Really good girl.
She'd do anything to help anybody. She loved to please people. She was just full of life. When she was 7, they'd rung us up from the fostering agency and said they had 2 children, brother and sister. They wanted to keep them together, but it would only be temporary. Could we take them? I said, yeah, no problem. And they never left.
She was full of life, crazy, outgoing, anything for a laugh.
We were very close. She always used to say to me, "You're never ever going in an old folks' home. If you need caring, I'll care for you." I said, "And what about your dad?" "Oh, well, he can sort himself out, he'll be right." Evie met her ex-partner when she was about 17. And they were together for 4 years, just over. And they seemed to get on really well. Things got harder for her. I think she seemed to lose herself. And that's how she met Jordan.
Evie lived here with her boyfriend, 28-year-old construction worker Jordan Monahan, who she had met in 2017. Unusually, though, she chose to hide her relationship from her foster parents.
I was never introduced to him, or I've never spoken to him. The day after she moved, Jordan was seen at the house. Looked like he'd stayed overnight. So obviously she'd been seeing him before she left her partner. But for how long, we don't know. It was very secretive.
Somebody told that she was seeing somebody and said, "What about it?" and started making inquiries, and nobody had said a lot at first. "Well, why do you want to know?" "Because she's with my daughter." And then all of a sudden somebody started talking, telling us about the kids and him setting fire to church when he was younger. He'd abandon, he'd get away with everything, he was a con man.
Yvonne and Bernard had concerns about Evie's new relationship with Jordan, and the situation drove a wedge between them. These concerns became heightened when people within the community revealed some troubling details about Jordan's past and the possibility that he was responsible for 2 infant murders.
Any death of a child is investigated. Now, when a second child dies within the same family, particularly in a short period of time, that really does raise concerns.
In 2018, the foster parents of Blackburn resident Evie Adams had become concerned about her relationship with a man called Jordan Monahan. And these concerns became even stronger when members of the local community made Yvonne and Bernard aware of Monahan's disturbing recent history.
Everybody just jumped up bandwagon telling me this about him, telling me that about him, what he got away with, what he was like. People were going around saying he was a child killer, and once they knew it was my daughter who was weak, the floodgates just opened. I was getting told all sorts.
She just hid everything. A very close friend rung me up and said that Evie was seeing Jordan. I said to her, "You think we're stupid? You think people don't talk? I know you're with him and I know where you go and what you're doing." I said, "Because I get told everything, you should know that by now." But we couldn't get through to her.
Monahan had a reputation in Blackburn, and it all stemmed from his previous relationship with a young woman called Laura Gray, who he had met in his teens.
Laura was best friends with Jordan's sister and had a huge crush on him. They'd known each other since they were children. And Jordan proposed when she was just 16 years old. There was no alarm bells amongst Laura's friends and family. He'd got a job in construction, she'd got a job in a care home. She thought they were really going to be moving on with their lives, and she had dreams of becoming a mum. That was her #1 dream. She really wanted to start a family, and she thought Jordan was the man that she wanted to start a family with.
Jordan and Laura's relationship seemed to be a happy one. They met when they were teenagers, becoming engaged in 2008 when Laura was just 16. Then in 2011, their son Logan was born. on the 11th of November.
Laura was so happy. She was getting everything that she'd always wanted. She'd become a mum, she had a beautiful baby, and Jordan was a really great, doting dad.
Everything seemed to be lovely. He was working, she was a stay-at-home mum, looking after the baby. He was a beautiful, beautiful, healthy, bouncy baby boy that everybody loved in that family.
She described him as her dream child. She was so happy. There were absolutely no concerns for his health.
The family lived here on New Chapel Street, and on the surface, Jordan and Laura seemed happy. But behind closed doors, the issue of money was causing cracks in their relationship.
She becomes pregnant again. Then she's found out that he's gambling. He hasn't been paying the rent. There's no money. He's spending thousands of pounds. I think she saw him once taking Logan for a walk, and he'd gone to the cash machine and was drawing out money, really to gamble. I think it all sort of come together. Then she realised that the person that she would loved and married hadn't been telling her the truth for many, many months. They was rowing over money constantly. I think Laura had had enough by that point, and that's when she told him she was going to leave him, that the relationship was over.
Laura had told Jordan she was leaving him, but on the same day, the 23rd of September 2012, the couple's son Logan was rushed to hospital.
A packet of paracetamol was left near him and he ingested them.
I think he had rang Laura, who was out shopping, and got her to come back, and they took Logan to the hospital. The hospital was looked and checked him over. There was no overdose. And that was it. Logan was took home, and that was the end of that.
Following the scare with Logan, Jordan and Laura reconciled, and their second child, Ruby, was born on the 8th of December 2012. Less than a month later, though, tragedy struck this young family.
Three days after Christmas, Laura was upstairs folding clothes when Jordan screamed for her to come downstairs. He had Ruby in his arms. She was completely lifeless. Laura was completely panicked and called an ambulance. She was rushed to hospital. She stayed there for 3 days under observation and was released on New Year's Eve. It wasn't ruled that there should be a police investigation. It wasn't known what had caused her to have her breathing restricted. On New Year's Eve, Laura and Jordan saw in the new year, as any young couple might. The children were in bed. Laura went up to bed after midnight, and Jordan said he would stay up to give Ruby her 2 a.m. bottle.
But it was later that night that Laura Gray was woken by screams from Jordan downstairs. Ruby wasn't breathing. An ambulance was called, and Ruby was taken immediately to the local hospital. Tragically, at just 24 days old, she was pronounced dead on arrival.
A routine police investigation did follow, which meant that Laura and Jordan were both interviewed by police. But her death was attributed to natural causes. It was ruled as acute bronchial pneumonia.
Because the child was 24 days old, it could have been bronchiolitis. There could have been other reasons. We don't know what causes cot deaths, we just don't.
Laura really struggled to cope with the death of her daughter. And if anything, the relationship became stronger, they became closer, she became more and more reliant on Jordan.
The tragic death of Ruby now seemed to bring Jordan and Laura closer together. However, it wasn't long before money problems started to cause issues in their relationship once again.
Jordan had problems with slot machines. Throughout his teens, he developed a problem with petty crime. Laura had been very frustrated by all of these problems over the years. She had no idea that he had been gambling so much of their money at a time when she really needed to rely on him for that support and that financial support. The sort of trauma that they were going through, she really needed him to step up and actually take control. And for her, this person that she had seen as a beacon of stability and support was actually lying to her and had created a huge financial problem for them both. She found out that he hadn't paid their rent, he had a separate bank account, there were lots of unpaid bills, and it was at that stage that she said, this relationship is over.
By the summer of 2013, Laura and Jordan's relationship reached breaking point, and on the 16th of August, she told Jordan she was leaving him.
The next day, she was feeling very unwell. So Jordan took Logan to the local swimming baths. When he got home, he told Laura to wake Logan while he went out to buy a pizza. Laura said as soon as she uncovered her son, she knew he was dead. She tried CPR. Didn't work. She called an ambulance and he was pronounced dead.
You have Logan now pronounced dead. Of course, it is suspicious.
The coroner ruled his death as unascertained. He told Laura and Jordan that he had huge condolences, and from Laura's perspective, it was a natural death, and Jordan was not involved. Jordan went on to appear in local media saying that he wanted to find justice for his children.
Again, to him, he is overwhelmed with grief. Again, look, we've lost another child. We need to be together. And she believes him again. There was issues with both these deaths. You can't have two deaths so close together in the same family without red flags.
Any death of a child under the age of 18 is investigated by the police and social care and health. Now, when a second child dies within the same family, particularly in a short period of time, that really does raise concerns. That to have two children die on you within a 6-month period is highly concerning and needs investigating thoroughly.
Logan had become the second child to die whilst in Jordan Monahan's care, a fact that had come to the attention of the authorities. So when the couple had a third child who started to show signs of injury, the police were quick to act. The child was taken away from the couple before the unthinkable happened again, and a murder investigation was launched into the deaths of Ruby and Logan.
He was in the swim baths for only 5 minutes in the cubicle. They never went swimming.
Jordan deliberately said, I'm going to go and collect pizza, so that Laura would have to be the one to find her son dead.
In 2018, the police were continuing to investigate the deaths of 24-day-old Ruby and 21-month-old Logan Monahan that had occurred some 5 years earlier. Despite post-mortem findings that the two children had died from natural causes, detectives had suspicions and behind closed doors had identified the children's father, Jordan Monahan, to be a person of interest.
The murder of a child or children is extremely complex to try and investigate. It's particularly challenging in an investigation when you have medical experts that are saying that the child has died through natural causes, automatically you know that if this is ever going to end up in a courtroom, the defence are going to be calling that particular medical expert to say, they've said this is natural causes, that there is nothing suspicious. As a police officer, if you have that gut feeling that actually this medical expert is wrong, then you would do all you can to try and disprove that medical expert. You'd be looking at a whole range of toxicologists, pathologists, brain experts, experts in eyes, all sorts that you need to pull together and build this picture to show that this is a suspicious death and not a natural death.
With the medical evidence being inconclusive, the police began to focus on the death of Jordan's 21-month-old son, Logan. Using CCTV to track Jordan's movements at the swimming baths on the 17th of August 2013, they hoped to identify something suspicious in his behaviour.
He was in the swim baths for only 5 minutes in the cubicle. They never went swimming.
In a cubicle in the swimming baths, he smothered his son, put him back into his pushchair and covered him with a raincoat and wheeled him home. Jordan deliberately said, I'm going to go and collect pizza, so that Laura would have to be the one to find her son dead.
Attention then turned to Jordan Monahan's daughter, baby Ruby's death, to see if there was any suggestion of foul play.
On the 29th of December 2012, Ruby collapses. She's taken to hospital, and the hospital have said it's probably bronchiolitis. Everything tests her and everything, and really send her home. That's a thing that happens to very young children. It's very, very common. But on the 1st of January 2013, Ruby collapses again, and she was at this time only in the care of Jordan. Then she was taken to hospital that day, and then she was pronounced dead.
The similarities between Ruby and Logan's deaths provided the police with the suspicious pattern they were looking for.
On the 2 occasions, he had tried to kill them in exactly the same way by restricting their airwaves. So that was enough evidence to reopen the investigation, which then showed he had used the same method every time.
In January 2018, Jordan Monahan was arrested and brought in for questioning in connection with the deaths of his 2 children, Ruby and Logan Monahan, that occurred some 5 years earlier.
It's extremely frustrating when you have your suspect in custody and you know for sure that that person is responsible, but the evidence isn't quite there. You only have a finite time to keep them in custody before you can either charge them or release them. And on this particular occasion, and like any other child death, when you're relying on a lot of medical evidence that just isn't going to come within that sort of 96-hour period, you're forced to make a decision, which is to release that person either on bail with or without conditions. And so on this occasion, Jordan was released on bail with conditions, which would have been extremely frustrating for the police, but inevitable because of the nature of the crime that they were investigating.
With Monahan released on bail, the police investigation continued. It was later that year he met Evie Adams and started a brand new relationship.
Having established this information, the police would have gone round to Evie and they would have disclosed, and not all the information, but they would have disclosed their concerns to her to enable her to make an informed choice about whether or not she allows Jordan to remain in her life.
Evie's foster parents were gravely concerned for her well-being. But despite this, she chose to continue her relationship with Monahan.
I'd heard on the grapevine, and I'd heard other babies, but it was all tickle-tackle, and nobody could tell me the proper story.
She fell out with her friends. She couldn't have friends. where they used to go down and, you know, girls' night, stopped all that. She couldn't go anywhere without him.
It was a terrible time. Because he wanted to alienate her from everybody. She lost all her friends, but he couldn't totally alienate her from me.
In October 2019, not only was Evie struggling in her relationship, it appeared her health was also beginning to suffer.
She was feeling dizzy, vomiting. 111 was rung, spoke about the symptoms that she was having, and then the phone went down. 111 tried to call back twice, but then phone calls wasn't answered.
I got a phone call one Monday morning. She sounded awful. She'd been ill all weekend, being sick and tummy aches, and I said, you need to go to doctors, I'll make an appointment and pick you up if you want. No, I've got an appointment for tonight at tea time, I'm all right. I rung it morning after, and she said she had tummy flu, but she sounded terrible. I know if I rung her and he were there, she wouldn't answer the phone. She said, I'm going to drop a few bits off, but don't come door because I don't want to give you what I've got. Which made total sense to me. I said, how are you? She said, I'm a bit better. And that was the last time I heard her.
It was here, at Hazel Close, on the 24th of October 2019, that the situation took a tragic turn when Evie was found collapsed at her home. At 8:50 p.m. that evening, she was declared deceased. Cause of death, an apparent suicide.
When the police attend any sudden and unexpected death, the mindset should always be think suspicion, think murder. 9 times out of 10, it's natural causes or there is another reason. But if you don't go in with that mindset, then the opportunity to try and recover from that is very difficult later on down the line. Now, on this particular occasion, it was purported that Evie had taken her own life. And I think the scene was effectively staged to that effect, that there were blister packets of pills around her. And so therefore the police would have conducted an investigation on behalf of the coroner. But from what they saw at that particular time, they probably would have come to the conclusion that, yes, this is a potential suicide. Now, having said that, with a little bit of digging, they would establish that actually she was in a relationship with Jordan Monahan, who is currently on bail for the murder of his 2 children. And having had that information, I would have been highly suspicious around the circumstances of the death of Evie at that point, and I would have been reluctant to have called it a suicide at that stage.
Jordan's reaction when Evie died was again to play the hero. She took her own life, tried to do everything for her. I tried to get her a doctor's appointment, she wouldn't go. He was there trying to be this person that cared for her. So the attention then, again, come back to him. What her death was put down to was, of course, an overdose, because that's what it looked like.
Policeman just came in and knocked on the door. Can I come in? Why? Can I come in?
Thursday night, about 10:30. And then to be told it was suicide. I thought, nah. I just said to him, were it tablets? He said, yeah, it were. So I just walked out with him anyway. He went then, didn't stay long. Said to Bernard, there's something not right here.
The first thing I said, I bet it's him. And then day after, 2 police ladies came and said they didn't think it was suicide, they thought it was murder. That was the day after.
And they said to me, don't worry, we will get him. It was a relief that they were seeing into it. They took me to see her at the morgue on the Saturday. She looked so fellow, I don't know. Not nice.
Although the police suspected Jordan was responsible for Evee's death, the official verdict at this time was that she'd committed suicide. This was the line Jordan was sticking to with both the police and Evee's friends.
He stayed in that flat for a little while after Evie had died, and people felt sorry for him. You know, it's another loss in his life. He's this person that grieves openly and wants this attention. And he picked up a picture and said, I want to put this on Evie's coffin. This is what's going to go on her coffin. And as he picked up the picture, a note dropped out, and it was a suicide note.
The suicide note was hidden in the back of a picture frame. The way it had been written was very suspicious, saying, I'm going to kill myself, but Jordan has absolutely nothing to do with it, which roused suspicion immediately. It was found that her fingerprints were not on it, but his fingerprints were.
When you've got that note, the first thing you're going to do is see the contents of it and then look at the handwriting, and then what you'll need to do is try and establish whether that handwriting belongs to Evie. If a suicide note is typed out, then there are some inquiries you can do around that. So the first thing you would do is look at the language and the tone of that note. You would look at, well, what device has been used to create this particular note that might show a date and time as to when that document was made. Was it made after the death? If that's the case, then that is highly suspicious.
The nature of Evee's apparent suicide note and Jordan Monahan's history immediately led the police to question the circumstances of her death. Officers scrutinising the 28-year-old man were now asking themselves if they were, in fact, investigating a serial killer.
There would have been a significant risk of him continuing to harm others and potentially kill them in the future.
There were no stab wounds. She's died through some kind of internal mechanism, and poisoning being the suggestion.
I want to kill him, honestly. I wanted to kill him.
On the 24th of October 2019, the body of 23-year-old Evie Adams was found here in her home on Hazel Close. A suicide note was discovered at the scene that the police quickly dismissed, and suspicion fell on Evie's boyfriend, Jordan Monahan. Monahan was already being investigated by police in connection with the deaths of his 2 young children from a previous relationship, Ruby and Logan. If the police were right about their suspicions, then what could have driven Jordan to carry out 3 murders?
I'm Dr. Ruth Tully. I'm a consultant forensic psychologist, and I've worked with perpetrators of serious crimes and victims for over 15 years now. In terms of the context of the offence, what I'd want to know about Monahan is, why was he driven to violence to maintain the relationship? What was it about his own communication abilities, about his problem-solving skills and emotion management that wasn't there for him to be able to resolve the issues successfully? Harming and killing the children at a time when the relationship's under threat suggests somebody who wants to maintain control of that relationship, to stay in the relationship, and possibly to divert attention from their own negative behaviours in that relationship.
The police were now investigating 3 separate murders, and they knew that if they could prove that Monahan had killed Evie Adams, it would strengthen their case against him for the murders of Ruby and Logan.
There were no stab wounds, there was no trauma to Evie. And so one has to come to the conclusion that she's died through some kind of internal mechanism, and poisoning being the suggestion. And they're quite tricky to investigate, but they're not impossible. And so the police will be looking at all lines of inquiry. For example, what are the types of medication that have been found in Evee's toxicology? Are those types of medicines within the household? Has she had them prescribed to her? Do family members have those prescribed to her as well? Have they been purchasing those items on the black market? And if so, who's been doing that and how they've done that? How have they paid for those items? And I think what the police established relatively quickly was that over a period of time, Evie had started to complain of feeling unwell and that she was going through a bit of a rough patch with Jordan. And so by having this information, this really would have raised alarm bells to think that Jordan may be responsible for Evie's death.
There was a few things that proved that he was lying. One, the suicide note he said was written by Evie was not. Under handwriting analysis, it was proven it wasn't her. The phone calls, the text messages that Evie had sent to him, telling him, so he said, on his phone that she wanted to end her life and that was it, you know, she wanted to die. We have phone technology that can place a mask to know where your phone is. Jordan was in the same room as Evie when them texts were sent. And that's really what put the nail in the coffin for him. Because he lied, he said he was elsewhere. He wasn't. Phone masks and phone records show he was in that flat at the time of that death.
And these weren't the only phone records that incriminated Jordan.
In the days leading up to Evie's death, it was found that Jordan had been sending multiple WhatsApp messages to a group called UK Tablets, trying to buy a cocktail of prescription drugs, which it then turned out he had used to poison Evie.
Monahan wasn't violent in the typical sense of physical violence, physical beatings. His methods were more covert. Now, this might have been part of his planning, or it may have been that this is the way in which he was able to overcome his own inhibitors to be able to commit such an offence. Monahan may have chosen the method of using drugs to kill the victim to try and cover up what he did to get away with it, but also because he may have found that easier than perpetrating direct violence to her. He's not someone that we're aware of has a history of physical violence in that sense, so this may have been his own way of justifying that what he was doing was less harmful or had less consequences. So he may have done this initially to try to maintain the relationship in some way, to look after her, to show her that he needs her, but ultimately he decided to kill her. And it could have been for him, as in many cases that I've worked with, that his thoughts were around, if I can't have you, then nobody can.
To build a case against Monahan for all three murders took significant time. But by the start of 2021, the police were ready to make an arrest. And on the 18th of January, he was charged with the murders of Evie Adams and his two children, Ruby and Logan Monahan.
It were horrendous. Not only have we lost her, but then we were getting all this. It was just disgusting. He was a foul person.
I wanted to kill him, honestly. I wanted to kill him. If I'd have seen him walking across the road, I'd have run him over.
He pleaded not guilty, and he has always denied the charges.
Monahan refused to confess to the murders, which meant that the case would go to trial. In the autumn of 2021, Jordan Monahan's trial began at Preston Crown Court, with the 30-year-old facing a triple murder charge.
Given the nature of these offences, the number of people killed and the manner in which it was done, it seems to me highly likely that had Monahan not been apprehended, there would have been a significant risk of him continuing to harm others and potentially kill them in the future.
I think the police prosecuting all three murders at the same time was a good decision. I think the complexities around the death of the children is really challenging for a jury to try and understand and get their head around. I think when you add on the case of Evie to that, it strengthens the case and it shows a pattern of behaviour. And there's a lot of similar fact evidence that one can show that says this is the personality of Jordan Monahan, this is the sort of individual he is, and this is what he's capable of doing.
We went to the trial. We sat there every day, listening to all the evidence they had against him. And of course we didn't know any of this because we couldn't be told beforehand. And some of it was horrific. But when he gave his evidence, it was so cold, so calculated, no emotion. And I thought, you haven't got an emotion in your body.
After a 10-week trial, on the 17th of December 2021, the jury delivered their verdict, and Jordan Monahan was found guilty of the murders of Evie Adams, Logan Monahan, and Ruby Monahan. He was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 40 years, which was later increased to 48 years on appeal.
Jordan Monahan, who was convicted on the 17th of December 2021 of 3 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to imprisonment for life with a minimum term of 40 years. However, the court is satisfied that the minimum term imposed by the judge was unduly lenient and substituted a minimum term of 48 years.
I think this is an extremely sad case. It's almost one of those cases where you could almost predict what was likely to happen. It would be extremely disappointing for the police to finally establish that Evie has also fallen to the hands of Jordan as well, and that if only she'd listened to the warnings that the police had given, you know, she may still be here today.
I don't think I'll ever be the same. I don't know how you can.
Life and soul at party, won't you? You get up and dance at middle of the floor, you get everybody, go around and drag everybody up. Just, that's the type of person she were. Singing out of tune, top of her voice. What are you trying to sing there? Is it a new song? Huh? I've never heard that one. Of course you have. It don't sound like that to me. Just laugh. You've got to laugh, you know. Good times. Yeah, I do miss.
I just wanted something for her. Bernie built me a little garden, statues and things on, and I put a few of her ashes on it. The rest are still outside of my bed. I can't do out with him yet.
The people of Blackburn knew Jordan Monahan was an extremely dangerous individual, and so did the Lancashire police. Tragically, that didn't stop him from taking 3 young lives, but it did stop a vicious killer from being able to murder again.